So you're working with rugby and you're working with a lot of kids. I'm actually always curious in what other people are seeing in younger athletes. Can you see a difference in the young kids that you're seeing now to almost what you would have experienced when you were younger?
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, I didn't really experience anything like the offering that I tend to work in terms of like, coaching camps and stuff that I tend to deliver are amazing opportunities for them at their age, like from sort of, 10, 11, 12, all the way up to 17, 18, to have the experience of, being around other people, the level of like learning is available to them, like in rugby that we're trying to deliver is amazing, fantastic. For people, the young people who have got aspirations to go on and play at the top level, like it's amazing springboard. In terms of the way the players and the young people are, there's a couple of things we've talked about and we're noticing. One is around the higher levels of introverted behavior. So I think there's some studies that you probably shouldn't quote me on this. I'm sure you can pull out the research, but I think there's some evidence that there are more introverts than extroverts now in young people, and how we react to that as coaches and stuff is really important to understand. But also, I mean, there's the distraction of these things, these phones.
Yeah.
These these are interesting things to manage for young people. I think they're a really useful tool, but can be really difficult. I think they provide a very easy way to detach and to be distracted. And sometimes that's not useful for young people. But I mean, I'm learning a hell of a lot. Like working with young people, it's a great, first, it's useful for my parenting life because I've got a 2-year-old. So I'm having a lot of moments thinking, I wonder if my parenting right now is going to benefit him or not in the future. Um, but it's also useful because I think working with kids actually helps you work with adults because I'm a big believer that ultimately adults are largely kids in grown up
Mm.
bodies. Like we still hold on to a lot of those same emotional responses. Obviously, a lot of our thought processes and our behaviors are dictated by our early experiences as children. So sometimes I find it's not in a belittling sense, but sometimes I find it's useful to observe adults and ourselves, by the way, in a sense of this reaction is almost as if as a child would react to this scenario. So let's sort of manage it accordingly. And again, I'm not saying that means you dismiss it or belittle it, but it helps us make sense of some of our emotional reactions sometimes.
What have you kind of stumbled on when it comes to managing the slightly more introverted? I agree, by the way. I actually do agree that the introverted, from what I'm just seeing, I don't know, I haven't delved into any of the research or the studies, but I'd be highly shocked if that wasn't true, that there were more introverts right now, because I'm seeing it. I just see
Mm.
general younger people coming into, whether it's senior groups, that are a little bit less sure of themselves. And do you know what? One of the other things I think about it is there's two parts to it, right? It doesn't mean you have to be extroverted to be amazing. You don't have to be loud and shouting it. I've got some of my favorite teammates and my best performing teammates were heavily introverted people. I think we just think that the extroverts are the ones that are they're the golden kids, or they're the X Factor players and the Mavericks, right? And while they might be entertaining to watch, they may not be consistent. They may not have all of those attributes that are actually beneficial. And the other bit is the fact that you don't have to try and mold yourself into being something that you're not. You don't have to mold yourself into thinking, if I am introverted, then I've got to make myself be extroverted to get there. So what have you sort of, as a group that are working there at the school and with Russell at the moment, what do you, out of those discussions, what do you think you're falling on to help with people who are introverted?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting one because it highlighted probably a few biases. So just going back to the research, I think a couple of the reasons I've already mentioned, but obviously COVID and children's experience of COVID is contributing to this, but and the lockdowns. The biases thing is funny because as you were speaking then, it reminded me at school, we did like a personality like profiling questionnaire. Probably wasn't very accurate, but I actually just remembered there was a question in it and it was to do with like introversion, extrovert. And I had the impulse that being extrovert was a better one than being introverted. And like it was supposed to be an objective thing. But there was some sense of me that the extroverts were the cool kids, the popular kids. There was something going on there that had probably suggested that was a better way to be. And I think we probably carry some of that weird. It's weird. It's curious. I don't know where it comes from, but that has probably manifested itself in society in general. Like, we feel like people are extroverted. It means they must be confident. It must mean that they have it all figured out. Whereas a lot of extroverted behavior might not necessarily, be reflective of what's happening inside. But yeah, it's a really hard one with coaching as well, because I think coaching is a lot about what feedback you're getting from the players right around you. Extroverts tend to give off a lot of obvious feedback, which informs your coaching. I think introverts by nature don't. So you have to notice things in a different way. You probably have to be a bit more skillful in your questioning, and it probably requires a bit more skill as a coach. It doesn't come as easy. So that's probably the first thing. I think being at peace with people who are introverted and like not trying to change them, like you've kind of hinted at, it is a great lesson and a great starting point. See how people interact in a game, in training, whilst being themselves, because ultimately that's what we want, right? We want people to behave on the sports pitch as their most comfortable selves. Like, in an ideal world for me, the sports arena, whatever your sport is, would be a place where you can feel most yourself and feel your whole self. So for a lot of people, that might be their whole introverted self, and we have to create room for that and be at peace with that, even though it might not look and sound like a session, like we think a session should.
Hey, if you've enjoyed that video, then you can click right here to watch the full unedited version of that episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel by clicking the button below. I'll see you soon.